Hello friends, how are you all? I hope you all are doing great. So in this class we are going to start with environment and biodiversity related act. Okay. So the most important legislation in this category is the Environment Protection Act of 1986. Through this act, central government get full power for the purpose of protecting and improving the quality of the environment. Okay, so now we will be studying this Environment Protection Act of 1986. Okay, so in the wake of the Bhopal tragedy, the government of India enacted the Environment Protection Act. The purpose of the act is to implement the decisions of the United Nations Conference on Human Environment of 1972 insofar as they relate to the protection and improvement of the human environment and prevention of hazards to human beings, other living creatures, and plants and properties. The Act is an umbrella for legislation designed to provide a framework for central government coordination of the activities of various central and state authorities established in the previous act, such as Water Act and the Air Act, which we have studied in our last class. Okay. In this act, main emphasis is given to the environment, defined to include water, air, and land, and the interrelationship which exists among water, air, and land, and human beings and other living creatures such as plant, microorganism, and any property. Okay. Environmental pollution is the presence of pollutant defined as solid, liquid, or gaseous substance present in such a concentration as may be or may tend to be injurious to the environment. Okay, so now let us study the provisions under this act, main provisions. So the act empowers the center to take all such measures as it deems necessary. Okay, and by the virtue of this act, central government has armed itself with considerable power, which include coordination of action by state, planning and execution of nationwide program, laying down environmental quality standards, especially those governing emission or discharge of environmental pollutants, placing restriction on the location of industries and so on, authority to issue direct orders including order to close, prohibit or regulate any industry, and the last is power of entry for examination, testing and equipment and other purposes, and power to analyze the sample of air, water, soil or any other substance from any place. The Act explicitly prohibits discharge of environmental pollutants in excess of prescribed regulatory standards. There is also a specific prohibition against handling hazardous substances except those in compliance with the regulatory procedures and standards. The Act provides provision for penalties. For each failure of the contravention, the punishment include a prison up to 5 years or a fine up to 1 lakh or both. The Act imposed an additional fine of Rs 5,000 for every day of continuing violation. If failure or contravention occur for more than 1 year, offender may be punished with imprisonment, which may extend to the 7 years. Okay. Also, the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, that is GEAC, is the apex body constituted in the Ministry of Environment and Forest under the rules of manufacture, use, import, export, and storage of hazardous microorganism or genetically engineered organism or cells 1989 under the Environment Protection Act of 1986. The rules of 1989 also define five competent authorities, that is the Institutional Biosafety Committee, that is IBSC. Second is Review Committee of Genetic Manipulation, that is RCGM. Third, Genetic Engineering Approval Committee, that is GEAC. Fourth, State Biotechnology Coordination Committee, that is SBCC. And last is District Level Committee, that is DLC, for handling various aspects of the rule. Now let's study about the ozone depletion, depleting substance rules. Okay, so the rules are framed under the jurisdiction of Environment Protection Act. These rules set the deadlines for phasing out of various ODS besides regulating production, trade imports and export of ODS and the product containing ODS. These rules prohibit the use of CFCs in manufacturing various products beyond 1st January 2013 except in metered dose inhaler and for other medical purposes. Okay, and other ODs such as carbon tetrachloride and methyl chloroform and CFCs for metered dose inhalers can be used up to 1st January 2010. Further, the new use of methyl bromide has been allowed up to 1st January 2015. Okay. Now let us study some acts regarding all this about environment. Okay, so the first one is Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 and amendment in 1982. Okay, so in 1972 Parliament enacted the Wildlife Act or Wildlife Protection Act, and the Wildlife Act provides for State Wildlife Advisory Board, regulation for hunting wild animals and birds, establishment of sanctuaries and national park, regulation for trade in wild animal products and trophies, and the last one is judicially imposed penalties for violating the act. Okay, so harming endangered species listed in Schedule 1 of the Act is prohibited throughout India. Hunting species like those requiring special protection in Schedule 2 and big game in Schedule 3 and small game in Schedule 4 is regulated through licensing. A few species classified as vermin in Schedule 5 may be hunted without any restriction. Wildlife wardens and their staff administers the act. An amendment to the act in 1982 introduced a provision permitting the capture and transportation of wild animal for scientific management of the animal population. Okay, now let's come on to the next one, that is Forest Conservation Act of 1980. So this the first Forest Act was enacted in 1927. Okay, and alarmed at the India's rapid deforestation and resulting environmental degradation, central government enacted the Forest Conservation Act in 1980. It was enacted to consolidate the law related to forest, the transit of forest produce, and duty livable on timber and other forest produce. Forest officers and their staff administers the Forest Act. Under the provision of this act, prior approval of central government is required for diversion of forest lands for non-forest purposes. An advisory committee constituted under the act advises the center on these approval. Okay, and this act deals with the four category of forest. First one is reserved forest. Okay, let's study a bit about reserve forest. Okay, reserve forest. So a state may declare forest lands or wasteland as reserve forest and may sell the produce from these forests. Any unauthorized felling of trees, quarrying, grazing and hunting in reserve forest is punishable with a fine or imprisonment or both. Second is village forest. So reserved forest assigned to a village community are called village forest. Third is protected forest. So the state government are empowered to designate protected forest and may prohibit the felling of trees, quarrying and the removal of forest produce from these forests. The preservation of protected forest is enforced through rules, license and criminal prosecution. Okay, so we will study till now only in this video. In the next video, we will continue from here only and study our third act. Okay, so thank you guys for watching. Take care. Goodbye.